Hey there, I'm Hallie, and right now it is a desperate situation at Gaza's border, with Hamas cracking the door open to maybe, possibly releasing some foreign hostages, non-Israeli hostages, if certain conditions are met. Here is what we know now about all of it. You've got thousands of people trying to get out now through a crossing with Egypt, a crossing that's closed. It didn't open up as planned, with thousands of civilians in Gaza trying to avoid what's expected to be an intense invasion as Israel retaliates against Hamas's terror attack last week. Questions tonight and confusion about exactly when and for how long the border could reopen, with our producer on the ground capturing this image: fuel trucks going in and out late today. Some people telling our team they are incredibly frustrated because they feel trapped.
It's not war. This is like kill people everywhere. I don't sleep. When I close my eye, I see a lot of bomb. I see a lot of houses down. It's not fair. This is not fair. This is not fair.
Tonight, new details from our Pentagon team. 2,000 U.S. troops, we understand, being told to get ready to deploy to the region on just a day's notice. We still don't know when the Israeli ground invasion could actually begin, with the number of people killed in this crisis growing. We're learning health officials in Gaza are using ice cream trucks, they say, as morgues, essentially, because there's not enough space at hospitals. Across the region tonight, 2,800 people are dead in Gaza. 1,400 have been killed in Israel. Israeli officials now confirming 199 hostages abducted from that country by Hamas terrorists, with Hamas late tonight, just as we were coming on the air, suggesting they may be willing to negotiate to release foreign hostages if and only if certain conditions are met. A veteran Israeli negotiator trying to get these kidnapped people out, telling our Lester Holt the window for rescue is closing.
What is the potential bad news for families of hostages? Is there a possibility that a deal doesn't get done?
There's a very big possibility that a deal doesn't get done. And the bad news is that the ground operation begins, and Israel is then dependent on commando raids, on special forces, on using intelligence to try and find them. The hope that some of the captors will desert their post and leave the hostages.
Matt Bradley is live for us in Lebanon tonight, but I want to start a little further south with Ellison Barber, who is at the Gaza-Israel border. And Ellison, talk about this new claim by Hamas about the potential for some non-Israeli hostages to be released. How seriously are people taking it?
Right, so this is a video that Hamas released via one of their Telegram channels, and it is one of the spokespeople for Hamas's military unit, Al-Qassam Brigade, speaking. And he said in that they believe they have somewhere between 200 to 250 hostages, people inside of Gaza. He said among those, there are some foreign nationals, at one point talking about how they weren't checking identification when they were essentially abducting these people, bringing them in, but they do believe they have some foreign nationals. He said that they are open to releasing the foreign nationals who have been abducted because essentially they're not a party to this war, to the issue. That being said, though, he said they would be open to that if certain field conditions are met. What field conditions means to Hamas, we don't know. What those conditions might be, we don't know. He didn't appear, based on the translations we have right now, our team is looking through, he didn't appear to give any more details on exactly what those quote-unquote field conditions would be for release. But he is saying in this video that they are open and willing to releasing hostages who are foreign nationals. But when we have spoken to the IDF, asked them about some of the claims Hamas has made on hostages, they're quick to say, be cautious what they say, don't always trust it. Obviously, there's a reason Israel would be saying that. But last night your time, about 4 a.m. our time, there was a bit of a briefing with a spokesperson for the IDF, and he was asked at the time about claims from Hamas that some of the people being held hostage had been executed. Hamas claims about 22 people who were being held hostage have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. The IDF said they couldn't confirm that, and they're careful to talk about the hostage situation because they say it is such a sensitive topic, but they said they couldn't confirm whether or not anyone who had been abducted had died. But they did remind reporters that Hamas a few days ago had made a public statement saying they would begin executing hostages. It's a very fluid situation, a lot of things changing. Israel right now, Hallie, has confirmed that they have spoken to the families of 199 people who were abducted. I will remind you, among those, a lot of children, some as young as 9 months old. Hallie?
Children, elderly people, women, of course, the list goes on. You talk about the situation being fluid, Ellison. That is extremely the case, extremely true at that very important Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt here. Not open, still closed. What is the outlook for the next 24, 48 hours? What can we report?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, what we thought was going to happen today for it to open at 9 a.m. local time was the most concrete information we had in terms of a possible deal where the Palestinian envoy to the Rafah crossing said that there was an agreement in place that aid could come in and foreign nationals could leave. It did not happen, as we know. And now there is this situation where there is humanitarian aid being stored about 30 minutes away from that border, people desperately waiting, hoping to get out. But the UN said the situation here is this. You have multiple parties that need to be in agreement in order for something to work, for that border crossing to be open. And they said, and I'm paraphrasing, but they said some of these parties are not speaking, to say the least, meaning Israel and Hamas. So it's an incredibly difficult situation. And right now there are a lot of people caught in the middle of it who need humanitarian aid that's not getting in, and people who want to get out who can't. Hallie.
Ellison Barber live for us there along the border. Ellison, thank you. We'll check back in with you, I know, as the night develops. At another border further north, Israel is now ordering people in 28 communities near Lebanon to get out as the IDF increases this cross-border fire with Hezbollah, that Lebanese militant group. Fears of a broader escalation now are growing for obvious reasons. I want to get to Matt Bradley, who's live for us in Tyre, Lebanon. Matt, we've been since almost the very beginning of this war, since just after that terror attack carried out by Hamas in Israel. There has been this concern of a conflagration, that this could set fire to the region in an incredibly scary and incredibly significant way. It feels more urgent today. Talk us through it.
Well, it's not just more urgent because of the events that you were talking about, those evacuations on the border, on the Israeli side, and all of those tit-for-tat firing. You know, we've been seeing rockets fired by the Lebanese, answered by tank fire and other weapons by the Israelis. But what's really alarming today are these comments by the Iranian foreign minister. He said, and he's been making, menacing rhetoric for the past week as he's been traveling around the region trying to recruit allies and some sort of, paramilitary groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, for whom Iran is a major patron. But today he said something unique. He actually added to this sort of a timeline. He said that there might be, this could be coming in the next couple of hours, some sort of strike by the Iranians. And he used for the first time a menacing word. He said it could be preemptive. Now, this is something that we've been talking about in the past. What is Hezbollah waiting for? Well, we were saying, and we've heard from experts and people who are sort of adjacent to Hezbollah, that they're waiting to see what Israel does in the Gaza Strip. Well, now it sounds like they're not going to be waiting. At least that was the language that we heard from the foreign minister of Iran. But, this is something that could change at any time. This could just be rhetoric. We still don't know, Hallie.
Matt Bradley, live for us there in southern Lebanon. Matt, glad to have you. Thank you. I want to bring in now Colonel Jack Jacobs, our NBC News military analyst. Colonel, it's good to have you with us here. We thought it was important to have this conversation with you tonight because what we're hearing out of the region here, not just what Matt is talking about, which we'll get to in a second, but what we started this broadcast discussing with Ellison Barber, this word from Hamas, and she makes the important point here that the Israelis do not take, of course, the terrorists who attack them at their word at this point, that they could be willing to release non-Israeli hostages if certain conditions are met. How should we understand that?
Well, take it with a grain of salt, of course. Hamas is attempting to delay the invasion of Gaza, and it's a way to influence the United States to put pressure on Israel. At the end of the day, it can't be taken seriously. Hamas hasn't even said what the conditions are, and of course, if pressed, the conditions will be that the Israelis disassemble its assault groups on the border and so on, which is not going to happen. The conclusion one draws is that Hamas is just attempting to wait out Israel to try to get international pressure from Israel's allies to convince Israel not to go into Gaza. Israel may wait even longer now than it has before to ensure that Gazans go south of the Wadi. But at the end of the day, Israel is going to go into Gaza, not to get back its captives, because that's going to be extremely difficult, but to do what they say they're going to do, and that is to eliminate Hamas.
And this idea, and we'll get to this more in a second with our Pentagon team, that some 2,000 U.S. troops have been put on an increased level of readiness to deploy to the region. Caveats there. They haven't been told to go just yet, just to be ready to go in a day's notice. And it doesn't necessarily mean they'll be sent to Israel or to Gaza. How do you read that? What does that signal to you about the U.S. posture here?
Well, first of all, we've got 2 fleets in the region. There are
That's right.
There are Marines aboard those fleets, and the American Army, the U.S. Army, has got an immediate ready force plus a division ready force. That would total about 2,000 to 3,000 troops, and I think they want to pre-position them just in case Iran or some other actor decides to conduct an attack on American forces already in the eastern Mediterranean, Holly.
Colonel Jack Jacobs, we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for that insight and that first perspective. As we talk about the fate of these hostages being held by Hamas, you can hear more of Lester Holt's conversation with that hostage negotiator, longtime negotiator, tonight on NBC Nightly News. Lester, of course, is reporting and anchoring live from inside Israel. We've also got some breaking news elsewhere in the world out of Belgium, with at least 2 people killed in a shooting in central Brussels, an incident that is being investigated as an apparent terror attack, according to officials there. This is a live look at the city. It is not clear as we speak if this attacker is in police custody, but we do know that officials in Belgium have raised their terror alert to the highest level they can go. It's at a level 4 now. I want to get right to Tom Winter. Nuts and bolts here, Tom, right? What are the facts in front of us in this instance?
Right. The facts in front of us of this shooting appears to have been captured on videotape. Hallie, the individual appears to have a long gun that's either firing in semi-automatic or automatic mode. The video is very clear as to what this individual is doing, going after specific individuals. Right now, the specific ideology here, what he is specifically saying is the reason why he's conducting this attack is not perfectly clear. It's a little bit of a couple of different things, and authorities are investigating that. But as you rightly said, this is being investigated at this stage as an apparent terrorist attack based on statements made by the suspect, some of which could have been posted to social media and something we're still trying to verify. A soccer match involving the Swedish national team has been postponed nearby. I think that's something we're going to want to watch because over the summer there was quite a bit of uproar about the burning of Quran, or several burnings of Quran in Sweden. And so that's something that we might want to potentially look at, and authorities might be looking at as well. Of course, given the global environment, this is something that has people quite concerned.
The escalation of the terror threat alert level in Belgium, how should we be understanding that, Tom?
Right. So in Brussels, it's now at its highest level, level 4, and through the rest of the country, it's at level 3. You know, we've talked a number of the years, Hallie, you and I have, about the various terrorist attacks in Belgium. It's an area that is not immune to this problem, and so they know to be preparing people. And obviously, given what we've seen worldwide, including some attacks in France last week that could be terror-related, they're not taking any chances and warning the people that are there.
Tom Winter, thank you very much. Appreciate you staying on top of this one. We'll be checking back in with you as news warrants. Appreciate it. We have a lot of breaking news coming into us from Washington as well. Not just the troops that we talked about, some 2,000 American troops preparing to deploy perhaps within a day to the region to potentially assist in some way the war that Israel has now against Hamas after that terror attack. We are also just learning moments ago that President Biden himself is strongly considering a trip to Israel as early as this week, according to 3 U.S. officials. These officials saying that planning is happening now, including on the ground in Israel, for a potential visit. There's a lot going on. I want to bring in Courtney Kuby, as well as our White House correspondent as well, who we'll get to in a second. But first, I want to get to Courtney, who's there. Court, President Biden's visit. We're going to get to our White House team in just a second here. Significant here at this moment, significant that troops are being told to essentially stand by. Big caveats, as I know that you and your team are reporting out. It doesn't mean they're going. It doesn't mean they're on their way. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily headed specifically to Israel.
Correct. All of the above is absolutely correct, Hallie. So at this point, this is a group of soldiers, U.S. soldiers, who were already on essentially a short leash for deployment. So a 96 hours, what they call it. They've been that has been shortened to a 24-hour. That means that once they get the call saying, hey, you have to deploy, they literally have to be on the airfield ready to go within 24 hours. And the idea is, if in fact they get that order, they have not gotten yet, they would go to the region, most likely to a country neighboring or nearby to Israel. Now, it's also important to point out that this is a whole mix of different troops. So it includes medical troops, people who could support with medical evacuations and things, explosive ordnance, people who are, experts in explosives. But it also will include sort of your classic infantry troops. So a whole mix of individuals here. Now, I also have to point out, yes, no orders. Yes, at this point, they would not go to Israel. But the officials who we're speaking with are not ruling out the possibility that ultimately some of them actually could go to Israel to support the IDF. Again, though, the caveat is it's not to support with kinetic operations. It would be to support things like the explosive experts could help with if the IDF is, let's say that they're just busy with a ground offensive in Gaza, they could be helping back in Israel with other support. So again, I know this is confusing. This is because it's not very clear what these troops, when they might go or what they specifically would be doing, but they are on a short leash to potentially deploy.
Courtney Kuby, it's excellent reporting. Thank you so much for being the tip of the spear for us on the military aspect of it. Let me bring in Hallie Rafa, who's outside the White House, on the diplomatic aspect. And a significant piece of reporting from you and our White House team, Hallie, that the president is considering travel to Israel perhaps as early as this week. We know that he'd been invited by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as kind of a show of solidarity, right?
Absolutely, Hallie. And when you think of the security apparatus that comes with a presidential movement domestically, let alone internationally, let alone to an area in an active war zone, you've traveled with presidents before, you know what goes into movements like that. So you can only imagine the planning and preparation that's going into these talks as the White House considers this movement to Israel. And we could potentially see the president go to other areas of this region. We know that U.S. officials, as well as the president, have been in talks with other foreign leaders. The president speaking with the Egyptian President al-Sisi today. So it's entirely possible that that also happens. But when you consider all of the unknowns in this region, Israel's counteroffensive against Gaza still considered imminent. We know that Israel is still taking on attacks from the north, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we still don't know how potentially chaotic the opening of the Rafah border crossing could be. So when you take all of these unknowns into consideration and factor that into the decision-making from White House officials, you can only imagine how difficult the planning and preparation is going to be for this. And you think of presidential visits to war zones before. Remember, it took a month before we saw President Biden go to Poland, not even Ukraine, after Russia invaded Ukraine. And then after that, he took that very secretive train ride into Kyiv. So no doubt White House officials very seriously considering the security conditions on the ground for this trip. Hallie.
I mean, one of the things that we're just seeing in such stark relief here, Hallie, is Secretary of State Tony Blinken, right? As you talk about, they're meeting with the Israelis, going in. I think they've been talking for something like 4 hours, even as we speak. It is after midnight there in Tel Aviv, and twice having to go to shelter because of those air raid sirens going off. Hallie Rafa, it's a good point. Thank you so much for bringing that to us. I appreciate it. Tonight, Americans stuck in Israel starting to make their way out of a war zone to Cyprus on a cruise ship. This is the government chartering the ship that you're about to see here to try to get a bunch of Americans out of the country. That's because a bunch of big airlines canceled flights because of this war. From the port in Haifa to Cyprus, it is about a 9-hour trip by boat. Everybody that gets on is going to be expected to pay back the government for the cost of the trip. I want to bring in now Josh Letterman, who is also covering the State Department working on charter flights out of Tel Aviv. He is in Haifa, where this ship is departing from, right? It is some people's only option to leave the country safely, Josh.
Yeah, that's right. It left a few hours ago from the port here in Haifa, and it is now currently somewhere over the Mediterranean Sea heading to Cyprus. And for the Americans that we spoke to who were gathered trying to get seats on that ship, this was bittersweet. They are really wrestling between competing instincts, Hallie. On the one hand, you have a lot of Americans who have deep ties to this country. For some of them, this is their adopted home. They come here to worship, to be with family, to study, and they want to stand in solidarity with this country during its time of need. And yet, at the same time, they find themselves in a war zone. It is not as safe here as it was just a week or two ago. And so people are really wrestling with this question of should they leave leave, and if so, what they leave behind. And I want you to hear from some of the Americans that we met today as they were waiting to try to get on that ship. Watch.
It was impossible to get a flight home. It's been stressful not knowing, literally where you're going to get your next meal.
I had planned to stay longer, but my kids and friends all said, hey, let's get out while you can.
It's been some days that we have to wait for the flight because we booked flight, got canceled, booked another one, got canceled, and finally we thought, okay, let's go with the boat.
I think it's important to point out, though, Hallie, that as hard as it is to get out of Israel right now, it pales in comparison to how hard it is to get out of the Gaza Strip right now. That is simply impossible for almost everybody.
Yeah, Josh Letterman, thank you very much. Glad to have you there in Haifa. Appreciate that reporting. Getting Americans home, of course, is just one of the many topics here in Washington, with some lawmakers trying to get Israel the help that it needs ahead of any broader escalations. One of those lawmakers is the Democratic senator from Connecticut, a member, of course, of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Murphy, who's joining us now. Senator, thank you for making the time to be with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'd like to start with some of that breaking news here from our team at NBC covering the White House, that President Biden, according to 3 officials, is strongly considering making a personal trip to Israel as early as this week. Would you encourage him to go? What would you want to see come out of that?
Well, the president can make his own decisions. Nobody knows the depth of the connection between the United States and Israel better than President Biden. But you have already seen the president sending his top diplomats, including Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, to Israel to make it absolutely clear that we stand with the government of Israel, we stand with the Israeli people as they seek to bring to justice those who perpetrated these heinous crimes. So I've been really proud of President Biden. I've heard from many of my friends inside Israel that his early statements, both emotionally connecting with the horror that country is going through, but making it also perfectly clear that the United States is going to be with them, has helped buoy their spirits at a time when a lot of people are reeling. So the president, I think, has been the kind of leader that America expects and the world expects. And if he decides to go to Israel, that'll be a very powerful scene, him standing with the Israeli leadership, the war cabinet, making sure that we help them bring these terrorists to justice.
We know that there is a strong appetite from the White House to get help ASAP to both Israel and Ukraine. You and your colleagues in the Senate are back, I know, tonight. You've got a big and busy week ahead of you. How quickly do you expect the Senate to move on that?
Well, I hope that we can move as soon as possible. We are still working with the Israeli government to fill out the details of the defense package that they need. My hope is as soon as those numbers are ready, that we will move forward and have a vote in the Senate, notwithstanding the chaos in the House. We can't wait for the House to pick a speaker. We need to move immediately. Now, I would hope that we would approve both Israel and Ukraine aid. We need to help Israel in its time of need, but we also need to make sure that Kyiv doesn't become a Russian city, and that will be Ukraine's fate if we don't get them additional aid in the next 30 to 60 days. So we know that both of those aid packages have the majority of support in the House and the Senate could show in the next few weeks that there's a big bipartisan vote for Israel and also for Ukraine aid.
To follow up on that, in your view, is it a must-do to link those two packages together, or would you be open, as some of your Republican colleagues want, to separating those into two different bills?
I'm pretty agnostic as to how both of them get done. I just think we should have a vote in the House and in the Senate on Ukraine aid, on Israel aid, because both of them will pass with flying colors. And my hope is that as things settle in the House of Representatives, that the pro-Ukraine Republicans get a commitment from the new speaker just to simply have those up or down votes.
Of course, obviously, any aid package can only go so far right now, with the House without a speaker appearing to be paralyzed. We do anticipate a speaker vote to potentially happen sometime soon. We don't know what's going to come of it, if it'll end with somebody holding the gavel. How do you see these kinds of delays affecting what is happening now with this crisis on the international stage?
Well, it makes America look incredibly weak, no matter how strong President Biden's leadership is. Everyone around the world, including Ukraine's enemies and Israel's enemies, know that we cannot deliver an aid package today, not until the House gets their act together. But frankly, the Senate Republicans are not covered in glory here. Tommy Tuberville's refusal to allow military promotions is compromising our ability to liaison with the Israeli military. We don't have an ambassador in Lebanon. We don't have an ambassador in Egypt. We'll have one in Israel by the end of this week. So Senate Republicans are behaving much better than House Republicans, but they've got to stop these blockades on military promotions and nominees if they are serious about really stepping up and helping Israel in the way that it needs help.
I want to move on, but I just want to follow up here. You said that we would have an ambassador to Israel potentially by the end of this week. You're obviously referring, of course, to the hearing for Jack Lew coming up on Wednesday. Do you think that it'll be a done deal by the end of this week based on the timeline we've heard? That feels ambitious, but you tell me.
Well, my hope is that we can work through some of the remaining objections from Republicans. There may be some Republicans that want to vote against the ambassador to Israel, but they don't need to extend that vote into next week. So my hope is that we will be able to take a vote this week on Jack Lew's nomination.
Senator, I happened to be doing Meet the Press yesterday when Senator Lindsey Graham came on and announced that he is leading a CODEL to a congressional delegation to Saudi. There is obviously a lot of discussion about what is happening to the peace deal between that country and Israel. Do you believe that it is dead? Do you believe it is on life support? How should we be thinking about that?
Well, it's hard to read the initial statement from Saudi Arabia, essentially laying all the blame for Hamas's terrorist attack at the feet of the Israelis, and think that Saudi Arabia is a credible long-term partner with Israel. Listen, I am a supporter of normalization between the Gulf nations and Israel. I hope that we can get those talks back on track. But there were many of us that were concerned about the things that the Saudis were asking in order to normalize relations with Israel, including a defense treaty with the United States of America. So I think right now the focus needs to be on the crisis at hand, rescuing these hostages, holding Hamas accountable, getting Israel what it needs. After that crisis has passed, then we can get back to the negotiating table with regard to normalization. But many of us who had questions about some of the things that were being asked of the United States, those questions will still remain if those talks get back on track.
Obviously, one of the most urgent pieces of this as well is that Rafah border crossing from Gaza into Egypt here that remains closed based on our team's reporting, with thousands of civilians, innocent people, trying to get out. What is your anticipation for when that may open? What is your sense?
Well, I know right now we're trying to prioritize getting American citizens through that crossing. I certainly understand Egypt's concern about a full opening of the crossing and the humanitarian difficulty of having that number of refugees in the Sinai, a place that really can't bear that kind of burden right now. I think what's equally important is moving humanitarian aid into Gaza right now. That has got to be our focus. And part of that mission is funding the humanitarian supplies. We've got to get the aid corridors opened up, but we also need the United States and European allies to put in money to the fund that ultimately will get those humanitarian supplies on the ground in Gaza.
Senator, before I let you go, I know you are just getting back into town, so I imagine that the answer to this is no, but I don't know if you have been briefed on the situation that is unfolding even tonight in Brussels here in Belgium. 2 people dead, at least, in what is being investigated as a terror attack there, according to officials. Have you heard anything about that? Is there anything you can share?
No, I have not been briefed on that. As you know, we just all got back into town, but I'm sure we'll get briefings tonight.
I know you have several ahead of you this week. Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much for your time ahead of what is going to be a busy week in Washington. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Coming up, of course, federal officials opening up a hate crimes investigation into a landlord who allegedly stabbed a 6-year-old little boy to death, a Palestinian American. What else we're learning about this as his family, his friends, his community said goodbye to him today. Next. Tonight, the family of a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy killed in an alleged anti-Muslim hate crime, supposedly motivated by the Israel-Hamas war, in pain and in grief, living a nightmare today at his funeral. Listen.
When he was dead, he was last words to his mom. Mom, I'm fine. You know what? He is fine. He's in a better place.
Wadia El-Fayyoum was stabbed 26 times at his home in Illinois by his landlord, according to investigators. His mother was also stabbed more than a dozen times. She is expected to be okay. The suspect in court today, he's facing several charges, including hate crimes. The sheriff says that The family was, and I'm quoting here, targeted due to them being Muslim and the ongoing Middle Eastern conflict involving Hamas and the Israelis. The Justice Department is now also investigating. I want to bring in Shaquille Brewster, who's been covering this story for us. No bail for this suspect today. What else do we know about what comes next? And specifically, any other details about this horrific nightmare for this family?
Hi there, Hallie. Well, we'll see the 71-year-old suspect, Joseph Shuba, appear in court in about 2 weeks for the next hearing. But in today's hearing, we learned a lot of new details as we saw this suspect in court for the very first time. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. He did address the court whenever he was asked if he understood the charges against him. You see some of those charges now, including first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of hate crimes, and that aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. But, Hallie, we also learned why prosecutors are so confident that this was an act of hate in their words. They said that was not just based on the interviews that they did with the mother, who's still in the hospital right now. Her family says that she's in serious or critical condition but is expected to survive. But investigators also talked to the wife of this suspect, who told them in their words that he was getting obsessed with conservative talk radio, that he knew his tenants were Palestinian Americans and that he wanted them out. All of that preceded that Saturday morning knock on the door that the family says started with a confrontation, an argument about what's going on in the Middle East, and then led to the stabbing, again, leading to the death of that 6-year-old boy. We also heard in court today, Hallie, and this is a really tough detail, but it's important to understand just how gruesome this attack was, that after stabbing that boy 26 times, again, a 6-year-old, that the knife was still in him when police took the boy to the hospital. It was a military, what's being described as a military-grade weapon.
The family, it is painful, Shaq, to hear some of those details here. The family, people close to the family, people in the community saw this in some ways as a moment, not just for the rage and the pain and the grief they feel, but also as a moment for action here, right?
That's exactly right. His father said, for example, that, yes, he wants accountability for the death of his son, but he also wants peace, and he wants people to understand the impacts of words and actions. And there was a lot of frustration targeted at President Joe Biden. You remember last week, he said that he saw images, or suggested he saw images of beheaded babies. The White House eventually walked that back, but you heard that come up at a press conference even today. Listen to a little bit of what we heard from the executive director of a Muslim group here in this area.
He have not apologized yet. The White House walked back that statement by him. But for him to claim that he's seen it with his own eyes and not to apologize for it, that will continue to promote anger.
Now, the president did release a statement last night. You see it there on your screen, saying this child's Palestinian Muslim family came to America seeking what we all seek, a refuge to live, learn, and pray in peace. He goes on to say that this horrific act of hate has no place in America. Hallie, this 6-year-old boy is being laid to rest this evening. There are vigils that we know about even extending to tomorrow. This is a heartbroken community for a boy who, his dad said, liked to play basketball, liked soccer, was the light in so many people's lives.
Shaq Brewster, live for us on that story. Shaq, thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Rite Aid is filing for bankruptcy. Its sales are down. It's also battling some opioid-related lawsuits. The company has called allegations it helped fuel the opioid epidemic hyperbolic. They want a judge to dismiss the lawsuit. Rite Aid says it'll still serve customers in stores and online, but that some underperforming stores, in their view, are going to have to close. Number 2, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills says player Damian Harris is heading in a good direction after he was hurt last night. He's a running back. He was hit during a game against the New York Giants. He badly hurt his neck. He was taken off the field in a very scary moment, couldn't stand up. The scene, of course, bringing back memories of the cardiac arrest by his Bills teammate, Damar Hamlin, last season. Ambulance on the field, all of it. Number 3, there's going to be 2 new sports at the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. The International Olympic Committee is approving adding flag football and squash to the tournament for the first time. They also decided to bring back baseball, softball, cricket, and lacrosse. Cricket hasn't been at the Olympics since 1900. Number 4, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour movie shattered records at its opening weekend. Highest grossing concert film release ever in this country. AMC says the movie made as much as $97 million just in its first weekend alone. Number 5, NBC News is hosting the 3rd Republican presidential primary debate. It'll be in Miami on November 8th. It's not clear how many candidates are going to qualify or which specifically who will qualify because some of the polling and donor requirements are stricter than the last debate. The moderators and the format, that's going to be announced a little bit later on. Still to come, a lot more on our top story tonight. Our breakdown on Israel's complicated relationship with its neighbors and how it's changed so much in just the last few years. We'll be right back. Today, new concern the war between Israel and Hamas could escalate into a bigger regional conflict. But the Middle East today looking a whole lot different than it did in 1948, when Israel declared its independence and its neighbors invaded. Many of the countries bordering Israel are now navigating complicated political and economic relationships with the country after some U.S. brokered deals over the past few decades. Here's NBC News' Raf Sanchez with tonight's breakdown.
As the war between Israel and Hamas rages, all eyes on the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Right now, the only potential way out of Gaza. For the attacks launched by Hamas on October 7th, Egypt's relationship with Israel was stable. The countries worked together on security, keeping Gaza in a military blockade since 2007, after Hamas took power. And they partnered on energy, with Israel sending gas to Egypt.
Israel's peace with its neighbors is always very pragmatic, to the point of cynicism. It's not a peace between the people. It's cold peace.
A cold peace that took decades to get to. The countries fought several wars after Israel's founding. But as Egypt struggled to defeat Israel, and Israel sought recognition in the region, heavy U.S. pressure helped bring Egypt to the negotiating table. In 1978, they signed the Camp David Accord. And the next year, a peace treaty, with Egypt becoming the first Arab country to recognize Israel. Jordan, to Israel's east, followed, signing a peace treaty with Israel in 1994, working together on security in the occupied West Bank. But tensions on Jerusalem's holiest site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as the Temple Mount, have complicated relations. Here's the King of Jordan just last year.
If people want to get into a conflict with us, we're quite prepared. I always like to believe that let's look at the glass half full, but we have certain red lines. And if people want to push those red lines, then we will deal with that.
To Israel's north, two countries that don't officially recognize it, Syria and Lebanon. Relations between Syria and Israel, ice cold. They battled over which country should control an area called the Golan Heights, which Israel seized from Syria in 1967. And Israel supported rebels fighting against Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad in a long, bloody civil war. Relations tense with Lebanon, too, with wars in 1982 and 2006, and a delicate balance now not to tip this war into a second front. Israel's relationship with the broader world changed drastically just in the last few years. In 2020, the United States kicked off the Abraham Accords, forging a deal with the United Arab Emirates to normalize relations with Israel that snowballed into additional deals with Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan.
The Abraham Accords in the past 3 years have really increased trade between Israel and the region.
It was the most progress the region had seen in decades, right at the end of the Trump administration. We know Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu also spoke with the UAE's leader Sunday night, and the two agreed to keep in contact, something unthinkable just a few years ago. President Biden was signaling the potential for more progress just weeks ago.
If you and I, 10 years ago, were talking about normalization with Saudi Arabia, and I think we look at each other like, who's been drinking what?
This time with Saudi Arabia. But then, Hamas attacking civilians inside Israel, maybe derailing those talks. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Sunday, trying to keep things moving forward. But the future of Saudi-Israel relations, clearly in limbo.
If the war stays limited in its scope, it might end up improving the chances of a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. If the war becomes escalated, if it really becomes a major humanitarian crisis, it'll be very hard for the Saudis to justify this towards their own population.
And Hallie, hanging over this whole conversation is Iran. Iran, the sworn enemy of Israel, the financial backer of both Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Iran has cheered on this Hamas attack, but the U.S. says it has no evidence at this point that Iran was directly involved. I asked an Israeli military officer, based on the weaponry that Hamas terrorists used, does anything there point to Iranian involvement? He said there's no sign yet at this stage, but the deep fear is that the war raging in Gaza could spread across the region, and you could potentially see a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. Hallie.
NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Western Bureau, officials in Colorado say a truck driver has been killed after a coal train derailed and a railroad bridge collapsed onto a highway. The truck was apparently under the bridge when it happened. Officials say crews are trying to get all the mangled train cars and the coal out of the road. The highway is going to stay closed while they look into this whole thing. Out of our Southern Bureau, the general manager of the Miami Marlins, Kim Ng, is leaving after 3 seasons, the team announced today. She made history as the highest-ranking woman in any major pro men's team in sports in North America. The Marlins say they wanted her back, but that she declined. No word yet on why. Also out of our Southern Bureau, a man in Georgia says he got a speeding ticket of $1.4 million after getting pulled over for driving 90 in a 55. He says he called the city thinking it was a typo. They said he had to either pay it or show up in court. Officials now say, well, it's just a placeholder. The actual fine caps out at $1,000. Quite different from $1.4 million. The city says they're working to adjust the language on future citations. Coming up here on the show, a judge just said what Donald Trump can and cannot say about his federal election interference case, where this gag order controversy has landed, and what happens if he doesn't follow the order. That's next. In just the last couple of minutes, we have seen former President Donald Trump hit the stage in Iowa on the campaign trail. And so far, he seems to be playing by the rules of a federal judge's partial gag order. That came down earlier today during a hearing in the special counsel's election interference case. We're going to get into what that means in a second, but here's the deal. Talking about the order itself still seems to be fair game. Listen.
Today, a judge put on a gag order. I'll be the only politician in history that runs with a gag order where I'm not allowed to criticize people. They'll appeal it, and we'll see. But it's so unconstitutional.
So context check here, right? What actually is this gag order? Can he still criticize people? He can, and here's what it's like, right? This is the sense of guardrails, basically. It's meant to keep Mr. Trump from making threats against basically anybody directly involved in the case around the election interference. So making statements about potential witnesses or about the special counsel and prosecutors, staff, families, that's all out of bounds. Can't do it. That's off limits. He can still talk about a lot of stuff. He can still criticize the Department of Justice and the president and the judge and Mike Pence if it's not related to the case. And he can still slam Washington, D.C. The gag order comes with the Republican primaries and the busy campaign schedule that goes with them just a few months away. The federal trial is set to start March 4th of next year, just a day before the Super Tuesday primaries in more than a dozen states. NBC's Ken Delanian is joining us now here on set. So he can say some stuff. He can't say some other stuff. Still pretty significant here. And the judge in this lengthy hearing, Judge Chutkan, talked about and addressed some of these First Amendment concerns that the former president's team brought up. They're basically saying, wait a second, he's running for president. You can't muzzle him. And she said, that's not what I'm doing.
She really tried to thread the needle and give him every opportunity to continue to, as you said, criticize the DOJ and say it's politically motivated. But she said, look, no defendant is allowed to call the prosecutor a deranged thug. She said, I've never seen that in any other criminal case, and I'm not going to allow you to do it, Mr. Trump. And she actually said that some of this rhetoric that Trump has been engaging in on social media has the potential to lead to violence. That was very concerning. She said he's attacking public servants who are just trying to do their jobs. So that's what she's prohibiting. Interestingly, she didn't include herself, as far as we can tell, in that. She said, I'm a big girl. I can take this, essentially. We'll see in the written order whether she includes herself. But she's definitely giving him a lot of leeway because she knows this is going to be appealed, probably all the way to the Supreme Court. And he does have First Amendment rights to engage in political speech as a candidate.
And you talk about her threading the needle, her essentially saying, listen, just because you're running for president, just because you're running for office, doesn't mean you get to say every word in the English language however you want, right? Like, you are also facing this indictment. I mean, that's the point she's making.
That's right. And his lawyers pointed out that when you say someone should be executed, that is not technically a legal threat. But when Donald Trump says the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff deserved the death penalty, that has a wider meaning. It reaches a larger audience. And we saw after he engaged in some rhetoric, a woman called and threatened this very judge and was arrested for doing that. So his speech has had consequences. He's going to be on the campaign trail a fair amount. We know a lot, quite a bit, end of this year, beginning of next year, with Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada all coming up. What happens if at a campaign rally he does, in fact, violate the terms that we just laid out here? Now, that's a very interesting question. She raised the possibility of sanctions, of fines, and even of jail. But the idea of jailing a former president running for president for his speech, that's a big, big deal. We'll see if that ever happens.
Ken Delaney, and thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. A lot more to get to when we come back, including some businesses, some schools, some celebrities taking some heat over taking a stance on the Israel-Hamas war. What some of that pushback looks like and how social media is involved next. Tonight, tens of thousands of people signing a petition demanding Columbia University fire a professor after he called Hamas's brutal terror attack against Israelis, and I'm quoting here, a stunning victory. The professor made those comments in an article posted online just a day after the attack. The Columbia student who started that petition speaking with our team not too long ago. Listen.
Regardless of what you believe about this current conflict, I don't think that the mass murder of 1,300 people, actually, I think it's now 1,400 people, could ever be described that way, especially when it was so horrifically done.
It comes as some of America's top business leaders are pushing back against other institutions for taking a position on the Israel-Hamas war. Some big donor families even saying they're pulling all their donation money from big universities because of anti-Israel remarks and anti-Semitism. Some celebrities, too, are getting some flack. Model Gigi Hadid called out by Israeli's government online, which said, in part, your silence has been very clear about where you stand, adding, we see you. Jake Ward is joining us now. Jake, talk about why it is that you're seeing some of these top sort of Wall Street people, business leaders, et cetera, so invested in what's happening on college campuses here.
Well, Hallie, I mean, right, there is almost no more divisive topic in the modern world than the moment we are in right now. And, you know, it seems that it has spread to literally every corner of public, intellectual, and commercial life, right? We are seeing people like, you know, the Harvard University students who just right after these attacks took place, you know, dozens of student groups put out a letter essentially, you know, blaming Israel for the policies that led to this attack. And right after that, you had prominent Harvard alumnus basically writing in and demanding that the signatories to that letter be made public. We had Bill Ackman, a very outspoken CEO of Pershing Square, a big hedge fund. You know, he wrote on Twitter in a long Twitter thread to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. The names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known. That is a very chilling thing to be saying about students on a college campus. And at University of Pennsylvania, John Huntsman Jr., the former ambassador and whose family has been a prominent fundraiser there for a long time, he essentially came out saying that the university had been not saying the wrong thing, but too silent. And he said silence is anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism is hate. We are just seeing it such that literally the topic does not seem to be able to come up in public life right now without there being some sort of backlash that in the case of students speaking out on this stuff could affect their livelihood for the rest of their lives, Hallie.
And of course, here we are in 2023, right? Social media plays a part in this in a way that we haven't necessarily seen previously.
That's right. I mean, you know, social media has, in theory, always been driven by the idea that it would be a marketplace of ideas, right? The sort of the free speech principles that, in theory, gave rise to the whole idea of social media is being sorely tested right now as it is being used both as a propaganda vehicle by combatants in wars all over the world, and of course also in this one. We're seeing, you know, a war for the hearts and minds of the Western public around this one on social media. And meanwhile, this is coming at a time when social media is deeply cut when it comes to trust and safety teams and content moderators. The cost savings that these companies have been trying to eke out in the last year have really hit those places hard. And so it is very, very hard to see how social media can come to grips with this. This is why you've seen the EU step up and tell YouTube, TikTok, X, and Meta to get their act together or face consequences. All of this, it seems, seems to be spiraling out of control here, Hallie.
Jake Ward, thank you very much. That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now. We come on the air with developments on a lot of fronts, including at Gaza's border, with a critical crossing into Egypt closed. Our team on the ground capturing video of at least a handful of fuel trucks heading into Gaza. Nobody headed out. With news now from Hamas on the hostages they've kidnapped from Israel. And now new fears of a second front opening up. Our team is live in the region. We're also live with who is getting out of Israel. Hundreds of Americans evacuating by air and by sea. Grim relief as we look at what's next for them and for those left behind. Plus, elsewhere in the world, breaking news of a deadly shooting in Belgium now being investigated as an apparent terror attack. The new details we're learning in just the last couple of minutes. Plus, just in tonight, President Biden apparently strongly considering traveling to Israel, according to multiple sources, with about 2,000 U.S. troops being told to get ready to potentially deploy to the region. We're live at the Pentagon and the White House. Then, could this war escalate the already complicated and fragile relationships in the Middle East? That's in tonight's breakdown a little bit later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and right now it is a desperate situation at Gaza's border. And Hamas is cracking the door open to possibly releasing some foreign hostages if certain conditions are met. Here's what we know now. Thousands of people are trying to get out now of Gaza through a crossing with Egypt, a crossing that's closed. It didn't open up as planned. You've got thousands of civilians trying to avoid what's expected to be an intense invasion as Israel retaliates against Hamas's terror attack last week. Questions tonight. Confusion about exactly when and for how long that border, you see it there at the bottom of your screen, when that Rafah crossing could reopen. Our producer on the ground capturing this image of fuel trucks going in and out late today. With some people telling our team they are so frustrated because they feel so trapped. Watch.
It's not war. This is like kill people everywhere. I don't sleep. When I close my eye, I see a lot of bomb. I see a lot of houses down. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Tonight, new details from our Pentagon team. 2,000 U.S. troops apparently being told to get ready to deploy to the region on just a day's notice, as multiple sources say President Biden himself is considering a visit, possibly as early as this week. We still don't know when the Israeli ground invasion could start, but the number of people killed in this crisis growing. We're learning health officials in Gaza are using ice cream trucks, they say, as morgues because there's not enough space for bodies at hospitals. Across the region, 2,800 dead in Gaza, 1,400 killed in Israel. Israeli officials are now confirming 199 hostages have been kidnapped by Hamas terrorists out of Israel. And Hamas, late tonight, is suggesting they may be willing to negotiate to release foreign hostages if and only if certain things happen. A veteran Israeli negotiator trying to get these kidnapped people out is telling our Lester Holt the window for rescue is closing. Watch.
What is the potential bad news for families of hostages? Is there a possibility that a deal doesn't get done?
There's a very big possibility that a deal doesn't get done. And the bad news is that the ground operation begins, and Israel is then dependent on commando raids, on special forces, on using intelligence to try and find them. The hope that some of the captors will desert their post and leave the hostages.
Matt Bradley is live for us in Tyre, Lebanon, but I want to start further south with Ellison Barber, who is live for us at the Gaza-Israel border. So, Ellison, a lot of new developments tonight, including in just the last hour about the situation with some of these hostages that Hamas has abducted from Israel. Talk us through what we know and where this goes.
Right, so a video was released by Hamas showing a spokesperson for their military wing, Al-Qassam Brigade, addressing a camera, talking about a number of things. And in it, he also talks about foreign nationals that have been abducted and taken into Gaza. He said overall, and this includes Israeli citizens that have been abducted, they have somewhere between 200 and 250 people inside of Gaza right now. He said when they brought people in, they weren't checking IDs to see where people were from, but he acknowledged that they do have foreign nationals inside of Gaza. And he said that they would be open to releasing them, in part saying they aren't party to this situation. But there was a big caveat in that, saying that they would be willing to do that if certain field conditions are met. Exactly what that means to Hamas in particular, we don't know. But he's giving a bit of a window. I guess you described it, I think, earlier as a slight crack in a door, saying that they would be open to releasing foreign nationals. But again, when field conditions are met. Hallie, I don't know if you heard that big boom near us.
I did.
Artillery going off in the distance. Remember, this happens every now and again. It's been really quiet here the last couple of nights that we've been here. That is the loudest boom we have heard this evening. We have heard a lot of helicopter activity overhead in the last hour, just hearing that artillery firing in the direction of Gaza. But back to what we were talking about, Hamas. He says that there's some sort of wiggle room, allegedly, for them to release foreign nationals. But again, the caveat being that certain field conditions have to be met, and we have no idea what that might mean. Hallie?
Yeah, as you say, Ellison, it is perhaps the cracking of a window, maybe. But as with so much, of course, there's a lot of context here around Hamas after that terror attack, of course, in Israel last week. There's also this video that's being released, and I think you referenced it. But can you tell us any more about that, purporting to show somebody who had been taken hostage?
Yeah, so this is the first piece of video Hamas has released, allegedly showing an abductee directly to camera, right? They've released some different videos showing when the abductions happen, different videos in certain contexts.
I don't want to interrupt you, and I'm sorry to do that. I just want to explain to people, we're not going to show it. We're not going to show it right now, what that video is. So I just want to be clear as you're talking about it. It is sort of a potentially newsworthy thing to say because, as you note, it is now coming days after Hamas first kidnapped those people out of Israel, and this is the first video that we're seeing.
Right, yeah, and we're talking about it in part because Hamas has released this video. The IDF, Israel's Defense Forces, has now commented on it, and the woman who is in the video, her family has spoken to some local Israeli media about the fact that they have seen that video. We are not going to show it to you, but it shows her clearly injured on her arms, appearing to be treated. It's described by Hamas in what they released, saying that she had a bullet injury to one of her arms and that they had operated on her. In the video, she looks to camera and identifies herself and says that she is being treated well. Obviously, those are statements being made under extreme duress. And she says at the end that what she wants is to come home to her parents, to her siblings, her family. She asks that they come and get her out of there based on what we have heard from the IDF, from what she says in this video, from the family statement. This is a 21-year-old woman. Her name is Mia. She is a French-Israeli citizen, and she was attending that outdoor open-air music festival that was attacked by Hamas militants on Saturday. What happened there at that rave has been described as the largest massacre in Israeli history. Around 260 people believed to have been killed there, countless people abducted, and now this video has been released showing this 21-year-old woman. Hallie?
Ellison, thank you. Before I let you go, just very briefly, do we have any anticipation that, and I know it's late your time, I think it's after 1 a.m., that at any point in the morning your time there could be any movement with that Rafah crossing, that border crossing between Gaza and Israel to let civilians out?
Not as far as we know. There's been so much back and forth, and so many different parties need to be involved in this. We do expect to hear from a spokesperson with the IDF in about 2-3 hours. I'm sure there's another boom there, Hallie. I am sure that question will be asked, and if we hear anything, we'll make sure to circle back with you.
Ellison, thank you. Obviously, you and your team stay safe. We appreciate you being with us. At another border now, further north, Israel is now ordering people in 28 communities near Lebanon to get out, as you're seeing more and more cross-border fire between the IDF and Hezbollah, with fears now of a broader escalation. I want to get to Matt Bradley, who is live for us in southern Lebanon. And Matt, from almost the moment that this exploded after those Hamas terrorists attacked Israel, there has been this concern of what would happen with the rest of the region here, the idea of an escalation. Help us understand how we should be thinking about that and what you're hearing today.
Yeah, I mean, the really big thing that we're hearing, if you zoom out, Hallie, is not just what's going on at the border behind me, though that is crucial and important, and that will probably play a big part in whatever happens next year, because Hezbollah, as you mentioned, which is based around here in southern Lebanon, they're the tip of the spear when it comes to this Iran-led coalition of countries that are opposed to Israel. But we also heard some things from the Iranian foreign minister today that I mentioned to you an hour ago. He's been using increasingly belligerent rhetoric, and he was pretty aggressive before, but just today, he put a timeline on it. He said it was going to be in the next couple of hours, maybe a preemptive strike against Israel. And a lot of this seems to be instigated or reacting to all of the U.S. naval assets that are now being parked in the Eastern Mediterranean right off my left shoulder here. One carrier strike group with another naval group on the way. But I spoke with a member of Hezbollah, a Hezbollah member of parliament here in Lebanon, about what it would take to bring Hezbollah into the war. Here's what he told me.
ما خط الأحمر للدخول للحزب الله في
This is the hidden decision that no one will announce except the leadership of the axis of resistance.
So the axis of resistance, that's kind of a cryptic comment, but it says something because Hezbollah is a patron of Iran. So is Hamas. So are other states like Syria's Bashar al-Assad regime, the Houthi fighters who are Shia in Yemen. You know, there's a lot of, we tend to think of Iran as kind of like a rogue state, but they have allies throughout the region. And all of those allies, whether they be militant groups or actual nations like Syria, they're all poised and ready right now, waiting to hear from Tehran on what to do next. They don't all dance to Tehran's same tune, but they really do follow very closely what Tehran says. So when the Iranian foreign minister says something like, we're going to be striking, there might be a preemptive strike, it could be in the next couple of hours, it could be just rhetoric, it could be just him ramping up the tone and trying to scare people, or it could be that he's about to make a decision that could affect the tentacles that Iran has spread throughout the entire region. And that's not something, exaggerating. That is really the situation here. Iran has allies, and they do follow what Iran says. And they are listening right now, and we can believe the decision has not yet been made, but it could be made maybe very, very soon.
It is that knife's edge, Matt, which is why you are seeing the evacuations of a couple dozen of those communities in northern Israel, closer to the Lebanese border here. Do we know anything else about how those are going, how those are being conducted?
Yeah, well, those evacuations, they're responding to the broader politics, the diplomacy that I was just describing, but there's also been a lot of killing, a lot of violence. And, it's nothing like what we're seeing in Israel and the Gaza Strip where Ellison is. And, that's dragging a lot of eyeballs over. But the fact is that there's a reason to pay attention to this because we're seeing back and forth shooting. We've been seeing guided missiles by the Lebanese, by Hezbollah here. And the Israelis are actually diverting quite a few of those new recruits who they would have been sending all the way to the Gaza Strip to the north of the country because they're anticipating this muscular response from Hezbollah. This happened all the way back in 2006 when there was a full-on war and it killed nearly 2,000 people. So that's why folks are so worried here. That's why you're seeing those evacuations. Hallie?
Matt Bradley, live for us in southern Lebanon. Matt, thank you. Tonight, we are just learning that President Biden is strongly considering traveling to Israel himself as early as this week, according to 3 U.S. officials. Remember, the president was invited to do this, to come visit Israel as a show of solidarity by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the weekend. I want to bring in Gabe Gutierrez at the White House. Gabe, part of the robust reporting team breaking this news here on NBC. If the president does do this, it is obviously significant. It would be a significant message to our ally, Israel. There are also, of course, risks involved here when you look at the security apparatus involved in traveling with any president here, especially since we don't even know when the Israeli ground invasion is going to be. And I just want to also point out, we can hear what's happening behind you, too, if you want to reference and explain to people what that is.
Exactly, Hallie. You took the words right out of my mouth. In this report here in the North Lawn, there's actually some Jewish activists that have been outside here at the North Lawn, and they are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. You can barely hear them over my shoulder here. And they've been here for a better part of a day. Several of them have even been detained for blocking the path to the White House gate. So this all comes, as you said, Hallie, that the president, we understand from 3 U.S. officials, strongly considering heading to Israel potentially this week. And we understand that planning is already underway, including on the ground in Israel. Still, the White House at this point has declined to comment. The National Security Council didn't immediately respond to a request for comment, but this is a very fluid situation. Hallie, as you said, this would be hugely significant because of those security concerns. You know, Hallie, from covering the White House, for a presidential trip, all the logistics that have to fall into place are just astounding. And, you know, just last year, following when the war in Ukraine began, it was about a month after that war that President Biden went to neighboring Poland. But it wasn't until about a year afterwards that he actually went to Kyiv. So the suggestion that President Biden could head to Israel as early as the next few days, a little more than a week after this attack by Hamas, incredibly significant. Now, the president and the vice president here huddled with their national security team this morning after the Biden administration canceled a previously planned trip to Colorado today. The president has been discussing this with his national security team as Secretary of State Blinken has been over there across the region, heading to multiple countries over the last several days. But again, yes, we understand that the latest is the White House strongly considering a potential trip for President Biden as early as this week, Hallie.
Gabe Gutierrez there outside the White House on the North Lawn. Gabe, thank you. To the Pentagon now, because we understand that some 2,000 U.S. troops, according to sources there, are being told to get ready to deploy to the Middle East, potentially within a day's time, possibly to help Israel. We should note here, they haven't gone anywhere yet, right? They may not even necessarily go to Israel or Gaza. If they even do get the order to be deployed, they could go to a nearby country to be on standby for support. The Biden administration, as we've talked about, has been showing solidarity with Israel, including by sending a second aircraft carrier now making its way to the eastern Mediterranean. This is where that carrier is headed. You see it here on the map. And if you take a look, you can also see some of the other tensions regionally here. As we talked about with Matt Bradley, rockets and shelling in the north at the Lebanese border. You see that. Fighting, some of it popping up in the West Bank. And then, of course, in southern Israel, that humanitarian crisis, or I should say at Gaza there, at the Egypt-Gaza border with Palestinians, some of those civilians in Gaza trying to leave down in the south. I want to bring in Courtney Kuby now, who's live with us. Talk about the idea of potentially moving troops overseas. And you heard us mention that caveat, and I know it's important here. They haven't been told to go yet. They have been told, get ready to go. It is a posture shift.
Exactly. So these are troops who are already on a short deployment order, potentially. So what's what the military calls a 96. They have 96 hours from the time that they would get a call saying you have to deploy anywhere in the world to the time they have to show up on the airfield. Well, that has been shortened. They're now on a 24-hour. This is about 2,000 troops, all different variety of troops, everything from medical support to explosive experts to your full-on infantry soldiers. Now, what's important to point out, you've already said that they haven't gotten their deployment orders yet, and that even when they do get them, they wouldn't necessarily go to Israel. Absolutely right. But I have to say, the officials that we're speaking with aren't ruling out that ultimately some of them could end up in Israel. But they are still saying that it would not be for any kind of military action like we might think of, Hallie. So things like supporting the IDF back in Israel as opposed to moving forward into Gaza. Again, something like an explosives expert, an EOD expert or technician. They might be able to help if there's concerns about explosives in an area, support the IDF while they might be focused on some sort of a front line, Hallie.
There are now these two carrier strike groups, too, Courtney, that are in the eastern Mediterranean, or at least moving in that direction here. Yet another piece of this as it relates to the Pentagon and the military posture.
That's right. So there's the carrier strike group, the Ford, that's already forward. They're flying combat air patrols over the Eastern Med right now, but they're staying in international waters. So it's still really just this show of presence, show of force, and really show of support for Israel. Another carrier, the USS Eisenhower, is headed towards the Med. But, you know, remember, this is another one that has some caveats. It was already scheduled to deploy to the Sixth Fleet area, to the European Command area. So it was heading in that direction. But what we just learned is that over the weekend is that, in fact, it is being tasked that same mission that the Ford has, which is this show of presence or support. Again, even though we're talking about thousands of sailors on these ships, aircraft, attack aircraft, surveillance aircraft, helicopters, missiles, the ability to fire from the middle of the sea, the Mediterranean, and hit in very precise manner targets on the ground. At this point, these ships are just being brought there for a show of presence or support. The real question, Hallie, is does that mission change? And I think that's a question that no one here really knows at this point. I don't think we should rule out that we may see more than just air patrols over the Eastern Med in the coming days and maybe even weeks, though.
Courtney Kube live for us at the Pentagon. Thank you so much, Court. I appreciate your reporting. We've got to get to some breaking news elsewhere in the world. Tonight out of Belgium, where at least 2 people have been killed in a shooting in central Brussels. 1 other person's been hurt, according to officials, in what's being investigated now as an apparent terror attack, they say. Belgium officials say that shooter, the attacker, has posted on social media that he was inspired by the Islamic State and was possibly motivated specifically to attack Swedish people. Right now, it's not clear if this suspect is in police custody or not, but we do know that officials in Belgium have raised their terror alert to the highest level that exists in the capital, the second highest for the rest of the region. I want to bring in now Tom Winter and Tom Costello, both who have more on this. Tom Winter, let me start with you. Where are we now? We spoke about an hour ago. Bring us up to speed on what we've learned since then and what happens next from here.
Right, Hallie. Well, within the last 60 minutes, we've learned officially that 2 people are dead, as you referenced, and that authorities in Belgium are acknowledging that this is a terrorist attack based upon social media statements made by the suspect, whose name they have not publicly released. This individual says that he did it on behalf of the Islamic State and appeared to show some motivation for this, as you said, attacking people from Sweden. There was a soccer match between Sweden and Belgium right near where this attack occurred. Over the summer, there were a number of instances of the desecration of the Quran in Sweden, as well as in other countries. At one point, actually, in Baghdad, Iraq, there was an attack and a protest upon the Swedish embassy where people there broke into that compound. So this has been a hot-button issue in Europe and is something that apparently, according to authorities, led to that attack today. As you said, this individual appears to still be on the run, appears, based on video that I've seen of the attack and the incident, deliberately targeted these individuals using a long gun. So we'll have to see where this investigation goes from here. This area is, of course, no stranger to terrorism attacks and was hit hard by several ISIS cells that came out of northern Africa in part several years ago. So this is something that we've been focusing on for a long time, even if there hadn't been anything that was happening in Israel and Gaza, Hallie.
Just to be clear, Tom, from what you're saying, and I just want to pull on the thread, it sounds like this attacker is still out there. They're still looking for him. They don't know where this person is?
Right. We have no indication from either U.S. law enforcement officials briefed or individuals in, or I should say officials overseas in Europe, that this individual is in custody in any way. So obviously remains a concern until we get some news on that front.
Yeah, for sure. Tom Winter, I know when we do, you'll come back and let us know. I appreciate all the reporting, Tom. Thank you. Let me bring in Tom Costello now. And Tom, our viewers may not know that you have deep experience and a deep understanding of Belgium. You went to school there. I know family there. Talk us through how rare it is or what it is like in this moment to see this kind of a terror threat being activated in the central part of the city.
As Tom Winter would tell you, it's become all too common in Belgium. In fact, you may recall that back in 2015, the Paris attack, the Bataclan attack, where they had 137 people killed, a very, very big nexus to Belgium. They came back and tied and found some of the suspects had Belgian links, and they were, in fact, from North Africa in this case. And then the next year, 2016, we had the Brussels airport attack and the subway attack, 32 people dead there. And that was the same terror cell involved in the Paris attack that was all involved in the Brussels attack as well. This is a particular neighborhood. This is close to the North Station, if you know Belgium at all. North Station is the nearest subway station, not far at all from the Atonium, which is a big landmark in Belgium, and not far from King Baudouin Stadium. And King Baudouin Stadium is where they have been playing soccer. And the big challenge has been tonight that they have 35,000 people in that stadium, and they didn't want to let them out. They stopped playing the game halfway through because of this terror attack on the Swedes. They didn't want to let everybody out of the stadium because they're searching for an armed terrorist in the neighborhood. So now it's midnight in Belgium. It's about 50 degrees. People are certainly not ready to spend the night in the stadium. It gets cold. How do you get them out piece by piece or one by one and get them to a safe location? That's the challenge for the Belgian authorities right now, because they've closed 2 of the metro stations nearby, the subway stations.
Tom Costello, a lot of moving pieces there tonight. We're going to follow every thread. Thank you.
You bet.
Some lawmakers trying to get Israel the help that it needs ahead of any broader escalations. One of those lawmakers is the Democratic senator from Connecticut, a member, of course, of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Chris Murphy, who's joining us now. Senator, thank you for making the time to be with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'd like to start with some of that breaking news here from our team at NBC covering the White House that President Biden, according to 3 officials, is strongly considering making a personal trip to Israel as early as this week. Would you encourage him to go? What would you want to see come out of that?
Well, the president can make his own decisions. Nobody knows the depth of the connection between the United States and Israel better than President Biden. But you have already seen the president sending his top diplomats, including Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, to Israel to make it absolutely clear that we stand with the government of Israel, we stand with the Israeli people as they seek to bring to justice those who perpetrated these heinous crimes. So I've been really proud of President Biden. I've heard from many of my friends inside Israel that his early statements, both emotionally connecting with the horror that country is going through, but making it also perfectly clear that the United States is going to be with them, has helped buoy their spirits at a time when a lot of people are reeling. So the president, I think, has been the kind of leader that America expects and the world expects. And if he decides to go to Israel, that'll be a very powerful scene, him standing with the Israeli leadership, the war cabinet, making sure that we help them bring these terrorists to justice.
We know that there is a strong appetite from the White House to get help ASAP to both Israel and Ukraine. You and your colleagues in the Senate are back, I know, tonight. You've got a big and busy week ahead of you. How quickly do you expect the Senate to move on that?
Well, I hope that we can move as soon as possible. We are still working with the Israeli government to fill out the details of the defense package that they need. My hope is as soon as those numbers are ready, that we will move forward and have a vote in the Senate, notwithstanding the chaos in the House. We can't wait for the House to pick a speaker. We need to move immediately. Now, I would hope that we would approve both Israel and Ukraine aid. We need to help Israel in its time of need, but we also need to make sure that Kyiv doesn't become a Russian city, and that will be Ukraine's fate if we don't get them additional aid in the next 30 to 60 days. So we know that both of those aid packages have the majority of support in the House and the Senate could show in the next few weeks that there's a big bipartisan vote for Israel and also for Ukraine aid.
To follow up on that, in your view, is it a must-do to link those two packages together, or would you be open, as some of your Republican colleagues want, to separating those into two different bills?
I'm pretty agnostic as to how both of them get done. I just think we should have a vote in the House and in the Senate on Ukraine aid, on Israel aid, because both of them will pass with flying colors. And my hope is that as things settle in the House of Representatives, that the pro-Ukraine Republicans get a commitment from the new speaker just to simply have those up or down votes.
Of course, obviously, any aid package can only go so far right now with the House without a speaker appearing to be paralyzed. We do anticipate a speaker vote to potentially happen sometime soon. We don't know what's going to come of it, if it'll end with somebody holding the gavel. How do you see these kinds of delays affecting what is happening now with this crisis on the international stage?
Well, it makes America look incredibly weak, no matter how strong President Biden's leadership is. Everyone around the world, including Ukraine's enemies and Israel's enemies, know that we cannot deliver an aid package today, not until the House gets their act together. But frankly, the Senate Republicans are not covered in glory here. Tommy Tuberville's refusal to allow military promotions is compromising our ability to liaison with the Israeli military. We don't have an ambassador in Lebanon. We don't have an ambassador in Egypt. We'll have one in Israel by the end of this week. So Senate Republicans are behaving much better than House Republicans, but they've got to stop these blockades on military promotions and nominees if they are serious about really stepping up and helping Israel in the way that it needs help.
I want to move on, but I just want to follow up here. You said that we would have an ambassador to Israel potentially by the end of this week. You're obviously referring, of course, to the hearing for Jack Lew coming up on Wednesday. Do you think that it'll be a done deal by the end of this week based on the timeline we've heard? That feels ambitious, but you tell me.
Well, my hope is that we can work through some of the remaining objections from Republicans. There may be some Republicans that want to vote against the ambassador to Israel, but they don't need to extend that vote into next week. So my hope is that we will be able to take a vote this week on Jack Lew's nomination.
Senator, I happened to be doing Meet the Press yesterday when Senator Lindsey Graham came on and announced that he is leading a CODEL to a congressional delegation to Saudi. There is obviously a lot of discussion about what is happening to the peace deal between that country and Israel. Do you believe that it is dead? Do you believe it is on life support? How should we be thinking about that?
Well, it's hard to read the initial statement from Saudi Arabia, essentially laying all the blame for Hamas's terrorist attack at the feet of the Israelis, and think that Saudi Arabia is a credible long-term partner with Israel. Listen, I am a supporter of normalization between the Gulf nations and Israel. I hope that we can get those talks back on track. But there were many of us that were concerned about the things that the Saudis were asking in order to normalize relations with Israel, including a defense treaty with the United States of America. So I think right now the focus needs to be on the crisis at hand, rescuing these hostages, holding Hamas accountable, getting Israel what it needs. After that crisis has passed, then we can get back to the negotiating table with regard to normalization. But many of us who had questions about some of the things that were being asked of the United States, those questions will still remain if those talks get back on track.
Obviously, one of the most urgent pieces of this as well is that Rafah border crossing from Gaza into Egypt here that remains closed based on our team's reporting, with thousands of civilians, innocent people, trying to get out. What is your anticipation for when that may open? What is your sense?
Well, I know right now we're trying to prioritize getting American citizens through that crossing. I certainly understand Egypt's concern about a full opening of the crossing and the humanitarian difficulty of having that number of refugees in the Sinai, a place that really can't bear that kind of burden right now. I think what's equally important is moving humanitarian aid into Gaza right now. That has got to be our focus. And part of that mission is funding the humanitarian supplies. We've got to get the aid corridors opened up, but we also need the United States and European allies to put in money to the fund that ultimately will get those humanitarian supplies on the ground in Gaza.
Senator, before I let you go, I know you are just getting back into town, so I imagine that the answer to this is no, but I don't know if you have been briefed on the situation that is unfolding even tonight in Brussels here in Belgium. 2 people dead, at least, in what is being investigated as a terror attack there, according to officials. Have you heard anything about that? Is there anything you can share?
No, I have not been briefed on that. As you know, we just all got back into town, but I'm sure we'll get briefings tonight.
I know you have several ahead of you this week. Senator Chris Murphy, thank you so much for your time ahead of what is going to be a busy week in Washington. Appreciate it. Coming up, more devastation in Afghanistan tonight after that country was hit by its 4th earthquake. 4 earthquakes in just over a week. But we're learning about the injuries and how many people were hurt. Plus, new details tonight on a deal between the White House and thousands of migrants who were separated from their families under the Trump administration. That's coming up in our 5 Things. Tonight, the family of a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy killed in an alleged anti-Muslim hate crime, supposedly motivated by the Israel-Hamas war. That family in pain and in grief, living a nightmare at that little boy's funeral today.
When he was dead, he was last words to his mom. Mom, I'm fine. You know what? He is fine. He's in a better place.
Wadia El-Fayyoum was stabbed 26 times at his home in Illinois by his landlord, according to investigators. His mom was also stabbed more than a dozen times. She is expected to be okay. The suspect was in court today, where he faces several charges, including hate crimes. The sheriff says the mom and boy, were targeted, they say, due to them being Muslim and the ongoing Middle Eastern conflict involving Hamas and the Israelis. The Justice Department is also investigating. I want to bring in Shaq Brewster here. Shaq, what else do we know about how that family is doing tonight, just facing such unimaginable pain?
Yeah, you can just imagine the heartbreak that that family is feeling, that the entire community is feeling as they lay this 6-year-old to rest. His funeral services took place earlier this afternoon. We know the burial will be happening later this evening. We heard from his father and from other family members who talked about how this was a 6-year-old who liked basketball, who liked soccer, who liked playing video games, and whose light was extinguished by this suspect, 71-year-old Joseph Shuba, who we saw appear in court for the first time today. This suspect is facing serious charges, 8 different felony counts, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, battery, and those 2 counts of hate crimes. And in the courtroom today, we got an understanding of why prosecutors believe and are confident that, in their words, that this was an act of hate. They said they based that not just on the account from Wadia's mother, who was stabbed, who's in the hospital now, still recovering from her wounds. She was stabbed about a dozen times. But they also are confident because of conversations they had with the suspect's wife, who said that he had become obsessed with what was going on in the Middle East, that he knew his tenants, he was the landlord of this apartment, that his tenants were Palestinian, and that he wanted them to go out immediately. And that's what led to him knocking on the door on a Saturday afternoon and then beginning this attack. You can just imagine those details combined with the funeral just leading to a heartbreaking situation for that family, Hallie.
This is also, while this is an isolated incident, there is the backdrop of the FBI recently warning about a rise in threats against Jewish and Muslim people here, right? I mean, that is some of the context.
Right, and we heard Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, saying that he saw an increase in those threats based on religion. He said he was concerned about a lone wolf attack, and that's what you're hearing from members of the community as well. You know, there is also genuine frustration with President Biden, with comments that he made last week. You'll remember he suggested that he saw pictures of kids in Israel who were, or babies who were beheaded. The White House then walked that back. But listen to how one executive director of a Muslim group in this area, what he said about that when he was with the family of Wadia.
He have not apologized yet. The White House walked back that statement by him. But for him to claim that he's seen it with his own eyes and not to apologize for it, that will continue to promote anger.
The president did release a statement last night saying hate has no place in America, Hallie.
Shaq Brewster, thank you so much. I want to get you over to the 5 things now our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the Biden administration is reaching a settlement with more than 4,000 migrants separated from their families by the Trump administration. They'd been crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally at the time. Under the deal, the families can live and work in the United States for 3 years while they get housing, mental health support, and also legal help to apply for asylum. Number 2, the pharmacy chain Rite Aid. You know Rite Aid. They're filing for bankruptcy, partly because its sales are down and partly because of opioid-related lawsuits against it. The company has called allegations it helped fuel the opioid epidemic hyperbolic. They're asking a judge to dismiss the suit. Rite Aid says you'll still be able to visit stores and go online and buy stuff, but some underperforming branches are going to close. Number 3, there will be 2 brand new sports at the 2028 LA Olympics. The International Olympic Committee approved adding flag football and squash to the tournament for the first time. The IOC also decided to bring back some sports like baseball, softball, lacrosse, and cricket. Cricket in particular has not been in the Olympics since 1900. Number 4, the Super PAC backing Republican Senator Tim Scott's presidential campaign is pulling the TV ad reservations it had made for the fall. In a memo to donors, the PAC's co-chair said spending right now would be a waste of money because the electorate is not focused or ready for a Trump alternative. The Political Action Committee says it'll still fully fund some other things like knocking on doors, hosting events, etc. Number 5, speaking of 2024, NBC News is hosting the 3rd Republican presidential primary debate. That's going to be in Miami, November 8th. It's not clear how many candidates will qualify since the polling and donor requirements are stricter than the last one. So still TBD on who's going to be on stage, how big of a stage it'll be, and TBD on who is moderating or the format. That's going to be announced down the road. When we come back, a lot more on our top story, that war between Israel and Hamas, including Israel's kind of complicated relationship with its neighbors and why it's changed so much over the years. That's next in tonight's Breakdown. Growing concern tonight that the war between Israel and Hamas could escalate into a bigger regional conflict. With the Middle East today, you know, looking a whole lot different than it did back in 1948 when Israel declared its independence and its neighbors invaded. Many of the countries bordering Israel are now navigating complicated political and economic relationships with the country after U.S. brokered deals over the past few decades. Here's NBC News' Raf Sanchez with tonight's Breakdown.
As the war between Israel and Hamas rages, all eyes on the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Right now, the only potential way out of Gaza. For the attacks launched by Hamas on October 7th, Egypt's relationship with Israel was stable. The countries worked together on security, keeping Gaza in a military blockade since 2007, after Hamas took power. And they partnered on energy, with Israel sending gas to Egypt.
Israel's peace with its neighbors is always very pragmatic, to the point of cynicism. It's not a peace between the people. It's cold peace.
A cold peace that took decades to get to. The countries fought several wars after Israel's founding. But as Egypt struggled to defeat Israel, and Israel sought recognition in the region, heavy U.S. pressure helped bring Egypt to the negotiating table. In 1978, they signed the Camp David Accord. And the next year, a peace treaty, with Egypt becoming the first Arab country to recognize Israel. Jordan, to Israel's east, followed, signing a peace treaty with Israel in 1994, working together on security in the occupied West Bank. But tensions on Jerusalem's holiest site, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as the Temple Mount, have complicated relations. Here's the King of Jordan just last year.
If people want to get into a conflict with us, we're quite prepared. I always like to believe that let's look at the glass half full, but we have certain red lines. And if people want to push those red lines, then we will deal with that.
To Israel's north, two countries that don't officially recognize it, Syria and Lebanon. Relations between Syria and Israel, ice cold. They've battled over which country should control an area called the Golan Heights, which Israel seized from Syria in 1967. And Israel supported rebels fighting against Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad in a long, bloody civil war. Relations tense with Lebanon, too, with wars in 1982 and 2006, and a delicate balance now not to tip this war into a second front. Israel's relationship with the broader world changed drastically just in the last few years. In 2020, the United States kicked off the Abraham Accords, forging a deal with the United Arab Emirates to normalize relations with Israel that snowballed into additional deals with Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan.
The Abraham Accords in the past 3 years have really increased trade between Israel and the region.
It was the most progress the region had seen in decades, right at the end of the Trump administration. We know Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu also spoke with the UAE's leader Sunday night, and the two agreed to keep in contact, something unthinkable just a few years ago. President Biden was signaling the potential for more progress just weeks ago.
If you and I, 10 years ago, were talking about normalization with Saudi Arabia, and I think we'd look at each other like, who's been drinking what?
This time with Saudi Arabia. But then Hamas attacking civilians inside Israel, maybe derailing those talks. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken meeting with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Sunday, trying to keep things moving forward. But the future of Saudi-Israel relations, clearly in limbo.
If the war stays limited in its scope, it might end up improving the chances of a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. If the war becomes escalated, if it really becomes a major humanitarian crisis, it'll be very hard for the Saudis to justify this towards their own population.
And Hallie, hanging over this whole conversation is Iran. Iran, the sworn enemy of Israel, the financial backer of both Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Iran has cheered on this Hamas attack, but the U.S. says it has no evidence at this point that Iran was directly involved. I asked an Israeli military officer, based on the weaponry that Hamas terrorists used, does anything there point to Iranian involvement? He said there's no sign yet at this stage, but the deep fear is that the war raging in Gaza could spread across the region, and you could potentially see a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. Hallie.
NBC News covers hundreds of other international stories every day, and because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our international teams have done it for you. Here is some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Afghanistan, a fourth earthquake in just the last week has shaken Afghanistan in a western province. At least 4 people were killed in this most recent one. Overall, more than 150 have been hurt. Taliban officials says the earlier earthquakes killed more than 2,000. In Poland, projections from the country's general election show a majority of voters backed opposition parties, essentially ousting nationalists from power. Now, former EU President Donald Tusk is in a pretty good position to take over parliament as a centrist. Turnout was super high, like even higher than when people there voted to topple communism back in the 80s. And out of Morocco, a fully solar-powered electric SUV just finished a 600-mile journey across some of the regions in the desert and along the coast. A team of Dutch students developed what's called the Stella Terra SUV. It runs off a huge solar panel. You see it there on the roof. The car turned out to be more than a third more efficient than predicted, so more efficient than they thought, which, you know, potentially bodes well for people who are hoping that solar-powered cars take off. Coming up here in the show, new details tonight in the case against former President Trump in Washington. What a federal judge says he can now say and not say in public. That's coming up. In just the last couple of minutes, we have seen former President Donald Trump hit the stage in Iowa on the campaign trail. And so far, he seems to be playing by the rules of a federal judge's partial gag order. That came down earlier today during a hearing in the special counsel's election interference case. We're going to get into what that means in a second, but here's the deal. Talking about the order itself still seems to be fair game. Listen.
Today, a judge put on a gag order. I'll be the only politician in history that runs with a gag order where I'm not allowed to criticize people. He'll appeal it, and we'll see, but it's so unconstitutional.
So context check here, right? What actually is this gag order? Can he still criticize people? He can, and here's what it's like, right? This is the sense of guardrails, basically. It's meant to keep Mr. Trump from making threats against basically anybody directly involved in the case around the election interference. So making statements about potential witnesses or about the special counsel and prosecutors, staff, families, that's all out of bounds. Can't do it. That's off limits. He can still talk about a lot of stuff. He can still criticize the Department of Justice and the president and the judge and Mike Pence if it's not related to the case. And he can still slam Washington, D.C. The gag order comes with the Republican primaries and the busy campaign schedule that goes with them just a few months away. The federal trial is set to start March 4th of next year, just a day before the Super Tuesday primaries in more than a dozen states. NBC's Ken Delanian is joining us now here on set. So he can say some stuff. He can't say some other stuff. Still pretty significant here. And the judge in this lengthy hearing, Judge Chutkan, talked about and addressed some of these First Amendment concerns that the former president's team brought up. They're basically saying, wait a second, he's running for president. You can't muzzle him. And she said, that's not what I'm doing.
She really tried to thread the needle and give him every opportunity to continue to, as you said, criticize the DOJ and say it's politically motivated. But she said, look, no defendant is allowed to call the prosecutor a deranged thug. She said, I've never seen that in any other criminal case, and I'm not going to allow you to do it, Mr. Trump. And she actually said that some of this rhetoric that Trump has been engaging in on social media has the potential to lead to violence. That was very concerning. She said he's attacking public servants who are just trying to do their jobs. So that's what she's prohibiting. Interestingly, she didn't include herself, as far as we can tell, in that. She said, I'm a big girl. I can take this, essentially. We'll see in the written order whether she includes herself. But she's definitely giving him a lot of leeway because she knows this is going to be appealed, probably all the way to the Supreme Court. And he does have First Amendment rights to engage in political speech as a candidate. And
you talk about her threading the needle, her essentially saying, listen, just because you're running for president, just because you're running for office, doesn't mean you get to say every word in the English language however you want, right? You are also facing this indictment. I mean, that's the point she's making.
That's right. And his lawyers pointed out that when you say someone should be executed, that is not technically a legal threat. But when Donald Trump says the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff deserved the death penalty, that has a wider meaning. It reaches a larger audience. And we saw after he engaged in some rhetoric, a woman called and threatened this very judge and was arrested for doing that. So his speech has had consequences.
He's going to be on the campaign trail a fair amount. We know a lot, quite a bit, end of this year, beginning of next year with Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, all coming up. What happens if at a campaign rally he does, in fact, violate the terms that we just laid out here?
Now, that's a very interesting question. She raised the possibility of sanctions, of fines, and even of jail. But the idea of jailing a former president running for president for his speech, that's a big deal. We'll see if that ever happens.
Ken Delanian, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. A lot more to get to when we come back, including some businesses, some schools, some celebrities taking some heat over taking a stance on the Israel-Hamas war. What some of that pushback looks like and how social media is involved. Next. Tonight, tens of thousands of people signing a petition demanding Columbia University fire a professor after he called Hamas's brutal terror attack against Israelis, and I'm quoting here, a stunning victory. The professor made those comments in an article posted online just a day after the attack. The Columbia student who started that petition speaking with our team not too long ago. Listen.
regardless of what you believe about this current conflict, I don't think that the mass murder of 1,300 people, actually, I think it's now 1,400 people, could ever be described that way, especially when it was so horrifically done.
When it comes to some of America's top business leaders are pushing back against other institutions for taking a position on the Israel-Hamas war. Some big donor families even saying they're pulling all their donation money from big universities because of anti-Israel remarks and anti-Semitism. Some celebrities, too, are getting some flack. Model Gigi Hadid called out by Israeli's government online, which said, in part, your silence has been very clear about where you stand, adding, we see you. Jake Ward is joining us now. Jake, talk about why it is that you're seeing some of these top sort of Wall Street people, business leaders, et cetera, so invested in what's happening on college campuses here.
Well, Hallie, I mean, right, there is almost no more divisive topic in the modern world than the moment we are in right now. And, you know, it seems that it has spread to literally every corner of public, intellectual, and commercial life, right? We are seeing people like, you know, the Harvard University students who just right after these attacks took place, you know, dozens of student groups put out a letter essentially, you know, blaming Israel for the policies that led to this attack. And right after that, you had prominent Harvard alumnus basically writing in and demanding that the signatories to that letter be made public. We had Bill Ackman, a very outspoken CEO of Pershing Square, a big hedge fund. You know, he wrote on Twitter in a long Twitter thread to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. The names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known. That is a very chilling thing to be saying about students on a college campus. And at University of Pennsylvania, John Huntsman Jr., the former ambassador and whose family has been a prominent fundraiser there for a long time, he essentially came out saying that the university had been not saying the wrong thing, but too silent. And he said silence is anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism is hate. We are just seeing it such that literally the topic does not seem to be able to come up in public life right now without there being some sort of backlash that in the case of students speaking out on this stuff could affect their livelihood for the rest of their lives, Hallie.
And of course, here we are in 2023, right? Social media plays a part in this in a way that we haven't necessarily seen previously.
That's right. I mean, you know, social media has, in theory, always been driven by the idea that it would be a marketplace of ideas, right? The sort of the free speech principles that, in theory, gave rise to the whole idea of social media is being sorely tested right now, as it is being used both as a propaganda vehicle by combatants in wars all over the world, and of course also in this one. We're seeing, you know, a war for the hearts and minds of the Western public around this one on social media. And meanwhile, this is coming at a time when social media is deeply cut when it comes to trust and safety teams and content moderators. The cost savings that these companies have been trying to eke out in the last year have really hit those places hard. And so it is very, very hard to see how social media can come to grips with this. This is why you've seen the EU step up and tell YouTube, TikTok, X, and Meta to get their act together or face consequences. All of this, it seems, seems to be spiraling out of control here, Hallie.
Jake Ward, thank you very much. That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.